Okay, so I wanted to save this part of the video for the end just to kind of go in a little bit more detail as to how we got the tab depth and the spacing of the tabs and the lengths of the tabs as well. And I felt like if I would have showed this at the beginning of the video, it would have kind of come off maybe a little bit overwhelming for some people. And I just wanted them to see that it was really simple and easy to make. But I know I'm going to get questions as to how we got the spacing, how we figured out our tab size and all that. And so what we're going to start with is we're going to start with the inserts. So what we're using here is an A5 binder. And A5 paper measures 5.8 inches by 8.3. So 5.8 inches wide is about almost a 1/16 over 5 3/4. So I know that the body of my divider, not counting the tab, the body of my divider minimum needs to be 5.8. You can add a little bit extra to ensure that it's going to actually cover the paper completely, or you can make it even. It's up to you. But the body needs to be minimum, whatever the width of the insert paper is. And in our case, it's an A5, so the width is 5.8. And we also need to know how much our punch that we're using cuts out. How much in does it cut and how much down does it cut? And in our case, it's cutting in 3/8 in and 3/8 inch down. Okay, so we want to take that 3/8 and add that to this width, and that's going to give us our starting point for our dividers. So if we add 3/8 in here, which it's going to be like 1, 2, 3, that gives us 6 3/16. Okay, so that's where we got 6 3/16. So that's just our starting point. The length is just the same as what the paper is. You just want that to be the same thing. Okay, so now what we're going to do, that's just the starting point for our template. Okay, how we got those measurements. So now what we want to do is we want to take our last divider, and for these types of tabs, the last divider is getting punched on both sides. Okay, and so once we punch out on both sides, we want to now measure from this point to this point, so the most narrow part of our tab. And in our case, it's 7.5. So we want to take that 7.5 and divide that by the amount of dividers we're going to have in our set. And in our case, we have 6 dividers. So 7.5 divided by 6 dividers equals 1 1/4 inches. Okay, and so what that represents is the smallest taper on our first tab needs to be 1 1/4 inches. It also represents the exposure of the other tabs. They also need to be exposed 1 1/4 inches. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to take that 1 1/4 inches and we want to add back in how much our punch is taking out. And like I said before, it's taking out 3/8 of an inch. So we want to add that back in twice because these are getting punched on both sides. And so 3/8 plus 3/8 is 3/4. So we're going to take that 1 1/4 inches, add those 3/8 back in. So 1 1/4 inches plus 3/4 gives us 2 inches. And that's how we get the mark for our first cut. Okay, so if you're using a different tool, something like this, but it's a different brand, you need to know what that cut is. This halfway cut cuts in 3/8 and down about 3/8. So you need to know, if you're not using the Fiskars tool, what your tool is cutting. And that's going to give you what the depth of your divider tab is going to be. But it's also going to, you're going to have to factor that in, to this first measurement here. So that gives us our 2 inches. And then we know we need 1.25 inches for the rest of them. So after that, from that point, we want to measure 1.25 inches. And we want to do that 1, 2, 3, 4 more times, okay? And so that gives us 6 dividers. So this is our first punch, second, third, fourth, fifth. Remainder is just gets punched on for the last divider. Like we said, gets punched on both sides. So that's the remainder for that. Now, I went ahead and tried it for other sizes, one other size. So I went ahead and tried it to make sure that this was going to work on other sizes. And so I tried it on a personal size. And a personal size measures 6 1/4. The insert, the paper insert, will be 6 1/4 by 3, and no, it'll be 3 3/4 by 6 3/4. Okay, so our length needs to be 6 3/4. Whatever our Fiskars punches out, or whatever tool you're using punches down, is going to tell you how much to add for your width. And in our case, we know it's 3/8. So we're going to take 3 3/4, and we're going to add 3/8 in. And that's what gives us 4 1/8. Okay? So for a personal size, we want to start with 4 1/8 wide by 6 3/4 long. So then we're going to take our 6 3/4 side, and we're going to start measuring, right? So we're going to have all of our cards already cut out, all of our cardstock cut out to 6 1/4 by 4 1/8. We're going to take that last divider and punch it on both sides. And then we're going to remeasure from the smallest point, see whatever that measurement ends up being. And in our case, this one ends up being about, let me see here, about 6 inches, which makes sense because we're starting with 6 3/4. We know our Fiskars is taking off 3/8 on each side. 3/8 and 3/8 is 3/4. So we're losing that 3/4 of an inch in here. Okay, so now we're going to take 6 inches and we're going to divide that by 6 dividers, and that gives us 1 inch. But we need to add that 3/4 back in to make sure that we're getting lined up on our first punch. And so we want to start for our personal size 1 3/4 inches. And then we want to measure from 1 3/4 inches, 1 inch each time. Okay? And so I went ahead and did that with these. And as you can see, you know, they all line up. They all got the same measurement going across. They're all showing 1 inch. So let me get in here, and you can see at those small points, we're at about 1 inch. And our exposure is also at about 1 inch on each one. I'm not sure if the camera is picking that up, but you can kind of see that it's about 1 inch each time. So that's the formula we use. You might be starting with a completely different size. You might be making a spiral bound book or a coil bound book from scratch, and you want to add dividers to it. So you're going to start with your paper size, and then you're going to figure out the depth of your tab and just do the same steps that we did here. And that's how you're going to get your divider size. So I hope that was helpful and cleared some things up, because, you know, I know a lot of times if I see things and it's too complicated, I'm like, forget it, I'm not going to try it. But that's the basic way that we did it. So whatever paper you are trying to cover, your dividers need to be the exact same length. The body needs to be minimum the exact width of your paper. And then whatever tab you're adding to that, if you're cutting this out yourself, if you're using it, you know, a tool to do like something like this to cut it out, you're going to have to kind of do some test cuts to figure out what, and measurements to figure what that is. But that's the steps that we did. And so that's what works for the A5. That it worked also for the personal size. So, you know, start there. And once you do that, you only have to do that once, because then you just make your jig, you know, and then you just follow that jig every time. And you're not going to punch into your jig. You don't need to do that. It's much harder trying to punch with this in front of it. So just line it up, lift it up, take it out, make your punch, and that's about it. So I hope this was helpful and cleared up anything, you know, any questions you guys might have. And I hope you go out and, you know, try and make a few of these. I did tell you guys in the video about grain direction and how we want to cut across the grain. And that's just to ensure that these are stiffer and they're not going to start curling and bending on us, because they're going to be very flexible. And the more that you're turning them, it's going to want to like kind of keep going that way, because it's got more give because it's flexible. So if we go against the grain, it keeps them stiffer. They feel better quality that way. And you're not binding it, like glue binding it to anything. So that direction is fine, because these are just, you know, they're just like loose leaf. So they're not glued to anything else. So the grain direction is your preference. If you don't care that it's that bendy, then just cut it however you please. But if you want them to be a little bit more stiffer and not as flexible as the paper that, you know, that's in here that you're trying to separate, then, you know, turn it sideways. You'll feel that stiffness, and do your first cut, your length cut. I mean, your width cut is going to go across the grain. Okay, so this cut is going to go across the grain. So I hope that I didn't confuse anybody with that, and that makes sense. So let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll do my best to clear anything up if I wasn't clear enough in this video. And I'll do my best to, you know, respond. Thanks again for watching. Check out part 3 for laminating the tabs. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks again. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Have a good one.